Hello and welcome to our SEC Live Game Day reaction. Alabama has upset Georgia to take the SEC championship, snapping a bunch of streaks, making for an exciting game, and my goodness, making for stuff that we can sure talk about. Before we get into all that, holiday season off and rolling, NFL in full stride, NBA and NHL hitting midseason form. BetOnline is your number one destination for all your sports wagering info. Up-to-the-minute sports wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. BetOnline is the top spot for everything pro and amateur sports. And it's not just the Big Four. BetOnline has info available at your fingertips with both desktop and mobile access at any time for almost any sport that's played, from MMA to international soccer. Head to BetOnline today. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Blayne, let's start here. Thanks for joining me tonight. Terrific ball game. Honestly, thought Georgia would win it. Did not. But this is my overriding thought from this game, okay? We can sit here. We can compare rosters. We can compare coaches. We can talk about all those things that we talk about before a big game like this. And in my mind, it came down to mistakes. Something that doesn't show up in star ratings, doesn't get you more or less NIL, doesn't get talked about. Georgia made two big ones, starting with the penalty before the field goal that doinked off the upright, and then the fumble on that end around. And you tell me, was that, if that wasn't the difference in the game? No discredit to Alabama. Let me be really clear. But games between pretty evenly matched teams, and this looked like one where the teams were pretty evenly matched, sometimes come down to those things, and I thought that was the difference.
Yeah, turning the ball over in your own territory against a team like Alabama, you can't do that. That was tough. The false start definitely hurt them. They tied their season high in penalties. Georgia did so. But the other big thing was there was I think it's going to be talked about for a long time, was that non-catch by Bond on fourth down that they didn't review the call. I think at
How
least
do you
if
not
people
review
would,
that?
I
Yeah.
think if people, I think that's a pivotal play in that game because it directly results in 7 points. And I think the ball dislodged and came loose, and they probably would have overturned it. And then, but all that aside, Georgia didn't play well enough to win the football game. They didn't stop the run well enough. They only gave up net 114 yards, but a lot of that was adding in sack yardage and stuff like that they got to Milroe a few times, and those were some pretty big losses for Milroe in terms of that. But at the end of the day, I think that Alabama played more aggressive than Georgia did. I think Georgia played very conservatively in the first half, way too conservatively on offense. Almost tight, if you will, which is weird. I think because they had been playing well all year, and you could tell that Bowers and McConkey were hampered a little bit but there's no excuses for injuries. You have to go out there and you have to overcome and adapt. And you saw at the end of the game when they kind of had to, and they pushed it down the field. Georgia went down the field with ease. They did that early in the game, and they did it down late in the game. It was that middle point, the second, third quarter, where Georgia got dominated, I felt like, up front at different times.
I was going through the stats and things, and the thing that stood out to me, the reason I thought Georgia would win this game, I just looked at the way Georgia had run the ball recently against good teams, and it just felt like it was vintage 2021 and 22 Georgia, and I didn't think Alabama's run defense was vintage Alabama run defense, and boy, did that not play out the way that I thought it would.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama just was better along the offensive and defensive lines of scrimmage this evening. Alabama was able to run the ball on Georgia when they needed to, and there was just a couple of times where I think the biggest drive of the entire game was after Georgia cuts it to 20-17. Alabama goes right down the field and scores a touchdown. I think that's the biggest drive of the game. Georgia had opportunities at a third down and short. They were getting pressure on Milroe, and then Milroe did a little shovel pass to Isaiah Bond, and Isaiah Bond was the one that hurt him that entire drive. 4 passes to him, a guy from inside the state of Georgia, from Buford High School, that ended up going to Alabama. So, yeah, I think that Georgia has shot themselves in the foot here when it comes to this. I don't think they'll make the college football playoff now because of how things are going to play out tonight in this 8:00 hour Eastern here as we go with Michigan playing Iowa. They'll thump them, and then who cares what happens with Florida State and Louisville? Really, it may not even matter for Florida State with as good as Texas played later today and things like that. And I think you got to put Alabama in now after they beat a Georgia team that had bit 129 in a row. So, yeah, I think the mistakes cost Georgia, that fumble in their own territory, not being aggressive enough, and then the missed field goal, definitely and then just getting whipped up front were the reasons they lost this game.
Hold that thought a minute. I want to return to that. Did you watch Nick Saban's not press conference, his on the field thing after the game?
No, I was.
He just looked so relaxed and like he was enjoying himself. Like you watch Nick Saban win those games over the years, and it's just, they just survived and move on to the next day. There doesn't seem to be a lot of joy, a lot of celebration. That looked like a guy who enjoyed this one, and you know what, he should have.
Yeah.
You snapped a team that hadn't lost in 736 days. I mean, I think Trump wasn't still president, but it wasn't long. I mean, it's been forever. You just defeated a dynasty. You did it at a time where everybody had you dead and buried after the Texas game. There was talk of, to quote a friend of mine in the business, decaying dynasty and all those things. I never was quite on board with that, but look at where they've come from, and it just looked like a different Nick Saban after the game.
Yeah, I mean, he's been there, he's done it, and there's still a hump for Georgia to get over. It is beating Alabama in an SEC championship game, something they haven't done, and that's still a hurdle that's left to go. And now, how much that's going to matter going forward, I don't think we'll ever have I think this was the last time the SEC championship is going to matter as much as it mattered tonight.
Yeah,
because there's going to be a 12-team playoff, and if it was right now, then this would just be like, man, Georgia lost and Alabama won, and we'll see how the seeding plays out, and they'll both be in the playoff. And I think going forward, you'll see both these teams in the playoff every year for the next foreseeable future.
Yeah.
So it maybe 1 year too late for college football with as many good teams as there are with the 12-team playoff. But at the end of the day, this was a playoff game. This was a quarterfinal game. Georgia didn't do what they needed to do to win. Alabama did. Alabama played better. Jalen Milroe made enough plays to win when he needed to, and Isaiah Bond was clutch for Georgia. He was big and got separation, and at times, with whether it was injury-related or not, Georgia couldn't get enough separation at receiver at times, and I think that was maybe Mike Bobo's hesitation with being aggressive through the passing game.
Yeah.
A lot of the first half and things like that, but it's just hard to believe that when you go down at the end of the game and you're able to score as easily as Georgia was able to going down the field when they needed to make it a one-score game again at the end. So it's just one of those, hey, when you got good football teams that go against each other, it's those small mistakes that kind of it's the small mistakes that kind of hurt you.
You said the 5 penalties, 56 yards, that was a season high for Georgia?
I think it was up there, tied the season high, I think.
Okay. So, that's interesting. And then again, it was when they occurred, not just the numbers. But the other thing, we had said we thought this would be more along an offensive shooter. What was the over-under on this?
The over-under was 50, 54, 55, something like that. I think
so. It didn't miss it by much, but I mean, like the last few games, the points have been in the 60s between these teams. Is more than you would think. I mean, you look at the box score. Georgia has 321 yards. Alabama 306. I didn't think it would play out quite like that. I thought there'd be a little bit more offense in this one. Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was. I thought that both defenses early on kind of did some good things, and both quarterbacks had some problems early on. Milroe started off awful for Alabama. Like he didn't hit. Georgia had him rattled early on, and you got to give credit. They made adjustments. Alabama made adjustments, and that second and third quarter is where Alabama won the football game. So I think that you got to give a lot of credit to Tommy Rees and Kevin Steele and Nick Saban, because they were able to handle it well.
Before we unpack playoff implications and what we think is going to happen, any more thoughts on just the game itself?
Yeah, I think you saw this is the least explosive, least dominant Georgia defensive line as we've seen in a while. And I think that there's going to be a revamping of that probably next year. You've got some guys that are younger guys that maybe weren't quite ready to contribute that are going to be there. And then also I think you're going to see Georgia be fairly aggressive in the transfer portal. I think you'll see probably 10 to 12 guys leave the program, and I think you'll see 10 to 12 guys come into the program. So they'll be I think they're going to be pretty aggressive, and of course they're going to have a big signing class. And then Alabama, I think you just now if you're Tommy Rees, you just got to continue to go forward and play to Jalen Milroe's strengths and continue to do some of those design quarterback runs, and then make the across the field reads simple as they have been. And he's just doing a great job for Alabama right now. So to continue to play to his strengths. And I think that Alabama is a tough team to beat going forward.
All right, we're doing this. If you're catching this later, Michigan, Iowa, Louisville, Florida State about to kick off. May have already done so as we're doing this, but let's look forward ahead to the playoffs. Okay, I'm gonna. If Iowa beats Michigan, I'm going to be stunned. But I haven't said that. There's been a couple of upsets so far, so nothing's given. But let's just assume Michigan wins. I cannot imagine Washington getting left out after being 3 in the rankings and beating Oregon twice and some other nice Pac-12 wins. So we're going to take those as a given right now. Fair as a starting point.
Yeah,
okay,
I mean, yeah.
I think Texas looks so good today. And there's two ways you can do this, okay? Because I think if you're comparing teams against the field and you're comparing teams against each other, they're two different conversations. And you're like, what's this guy talking about? But let me get to it, okay? Alabama now has beaten Georgia on a neutral field, Ole Miss at home, LSU at home, Tennessee at home, road trip wins, A&M at Kentucky, at Auburn. Does anybody in the country have, and this is arbitrary, but does any team in the country have a better 7 wins or maybe a better, I mean, Alabama just nailed the best win in the country.
Yeah, I mean, that or Texas beating Alabama may be the best win in the country at Alabama.
Yeah, well, let's hold the thought on that a minute, okay? Let's pretend we're comparing the teams to the field. Texas's wins at Alabama, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, neutral field, Kansas at home, and then it gets into at TCU, Iowa State, Texas Tech, BYU, and beating Houston on the road. But I don't know how much those things don't move the needles when we're talking about it.
Yeah.
If you're just comparing resumes, and let's throw Florida State in there, LSU neutral field, at Clemson, Duke and Miami, both at home, at Florida, at Syracuse. I mean, really the LSU win is the only one that jumps off the page.
Yeah. No, the problem is that I don't think that they're going to do that. I think they're going to say, okay, if Florida State were to win this game, they're going to say they are a Power 5 undefeated conference champion, and I think they're going to put them in. I just think that's what they're going to do. I know what you're saying. Yeah. In terms of the resume and things like that. And listen, Bama's got to be in, Michigan's got to be in, Texas has got to be in, and then Washington too. I mean, I don't know what you're going to do.
I think Florida State gets left out.
Yeah, Florida State may get left out for sure. That's true.
I don't know. And just for the sake of this, Georgia's got wins over Missouri, Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Auburn, Kentucky, Florida neutral field. I know people talked about Georgia's schedule being weaker, and it was, but those are also some nice ones. I'm with you. I don't think Georgia's going to make the playoff. I'm just trying to cover all our bases. And just to be fair, you got Ohio State sitting there, have beat Penn State, won at Notre Dame, won at Wisconsin, won at Rutgers, beat Maryland. I don't think Ohio State's getting in. I guess the thing I'm making is I'm curious how the committee processes it. Do they compare these teams to the field, or do they start getting head to head? And I don't think you can avoid it with Texas having won at Alabama. But my point is, you process this conversation a little differently depending on the angle you take, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's been the whole talk all week, the best versus the best 4 teams versus the most deserving 4 teams. And Kirby Smart just said in his post-game press conference, he's like, hey, the playoff committee, if you're going to go, it's supposed to be the best 4 teams. And if you're going to say Georgia's not one of the best 4 teams, then he said you need to get in a different profession, which, I mean, I think that there's some validity to that. But at the end of the day, this was a playoff game, and Alabama won that playoff game. I think the SEC is the best conference. I don't care what happened early on in the year with non-conference or different teams and all that kind of stuff. I think week in, week out, NFL talent, the lines of scrimmage, all that kind of stuff, the SEC is the best conference in America, and Alabama just won that conference. Alabama has to be in. Washington has to be in because of how good they've looked, and with Michael Penix and winning that conference, and that conference was much improved this year, the last year of the Pac-12. So, I think you've got to put Washington in. Michigan's in if they win, and then it's going to be Texas or Florida State. And then you would have Texas, Florida State, and Georgia, and I just don't see them putting a Georgia team that just lost, even though I think Georgia could beat both of those 2 teams. I really do.
Yeah.
I don't think that they'll put them in. Especially with it's almost like you get benefited if you lose early on compared to if you lose late. So,
well, I think you do, and here's the parity at the top. I keep kind of a running total of 4 computers and points above average. Here's the list, and some of this won't be reflected like on what Alabama and Georgia did today. That's not been tabulated, nor has Texas's win, nor has Oregon's loss or Washington's win. But here it was coming into the weekend. Michigan, 28.9 points above average. Ohio State, 26.5. Georgia, 26.5. Oregon, 25.5. Penn State, 25. Alabama, 23.8. Texas, 23.2. And then Florida State at the bottom, 21.3. Washington is all the way down at 17.6 before that Oregon win. That was 13. Now, we know Washington's going to get in, and it should. But look at the parity, man. Of your top 7 teams, that is less than a touchdown difference in all of them. That's crazy. It is this NFL-like parity that I've been saying all year. We have it now.
Yeah, it was a year, and I think that the problem with some of these conferences was that I think a lot of these conferences were top heavy this year, Chris, and that allowed more undefeated teams towards the end, because coming into this weekend, I think the top 8 teams, Chris, were 71-0 against teams that were not ranked in the top 25. 71-0. And that just doesn't happen. There's usually somebody that loses a game that they absolutely should not lose, during the year, and it just didn't happen this year. There wasn't the amount of chaos that there needed to be for it. Typically there's a team that has a glaring loss and it says, oh, that they're out, and that just didn't happen. We've never had this many teams on championship Saturday that have been alive for the college football playoffs. It's been maybe 6 at the most, but there was legitimately 8 teams. So
now look, this was all pointing to a conclusion, and I think Whitney Sutton has nailed it here in the comments, sort of. It was another thought I had. Look, Blayne, you can make it. Washington and Michigan have got to be in, presuming Michigan wins. Are you going to leave out big brands like Texas and Alabama? And I know that's not how it's supposed to happen, but are you going to leave those teams out when they've got 2 losses combined? One was against another one. They're conference champions. They're 2 of the biggest brands in college football. And Florida State, I think Florida State with its quarterback gets in, but I mean, are you gonna put Florida State without Jordan Travis up against Michigan in round 1
If you do, you're asking for the same result that Georgia put on TCU last year.
Bingo. I think that's what I'm getting at. I just think that's how it's going to play out. Is that fair to Florida State? Probably not. But somebody's going to get screwed in this, and I think that's where it's going to be.
Yeah, I think Florida State is probably going to be it. Now, is there chaos? We didn't think we'd see some things that we've seen so far. So who knows? Or do we see something crazy tonight? And we may. But at the end of the day, I put out there early in the week, I said, there's no excuses. This is a playing game. It doesn't matter about, anything else. You have to win this game in the SEC championship to get in. And Alabama did what they need to. They didn't turn the ball over at key times like Georgia did. They didn't make the self-inflicted wounds, and they were able to run the football better than Georgia was. So they earned it. And I think with the SEC championship in their pocket, I think that they deserve in, even though Florida State, like you said, could be undefeated and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, are we even going to compare, saying you think an Alabama team wouldn't be a double digit to 2 touchdown favorite over Florida State right now with that situation? Yeah. So,
and I think my suspicion is that common sense wins out, because I see it the same way. Again, is that fair to Florida State? Probably not. Let's cover all bases here. Let's say something really crazy happens. Let's say both Michigan and Florida State lose. Now, I think you give Iowa the ball for 2 days and they might not score 10 points against Michigan. But we've seen some stuff happen we didn't anticipate. Then what do we? Then I guess we're looking at
if that happened, Georgia would be in. But I mean, both Alabama and Georgia would be in. But Iowa, I think you could put Iowa out there with no defense in front of them, and they may not complete 70% of their passes. It's just rough. Like they can't do anything. It would have to be JJ McCarthy would have to, somehow exit the game, and there would have to be Michigan turn the ball over twice in their own territory. Iowa punch it in. It's just, it would be absolutely the craziest game you've ever seen for that to happen. But Iowa's really, really bad on offense, really, really good on defense. So but they don't have enough to beat Michigan.
So if Florida State and Michigan were to both lose, I think we'd be looking at Alabama, Washington, Texas, and then you get Georgia. I don't know that Georgia's just you in at that point, because you got Ohio State, but Ohio State didn't win its conference championship, so that probably resolves it there. But
didn't even play for their conference championship, so
right.
But yeah, it's Georgia's not going to get in. Alabama, I think now the question is, where does Alabama get seated? I think Alabama. I mean, you're talking about jumping from 8 all the way up to possibly 2.
I don't see it anywhere other than 4. Do you?
Ooh, I don't know. Then so now you're going to tell me if it holds true, everything, we're going to have Alabama and Michigan in the first round in the Sugar Bowl probably. So that'd be crazy.
You going to put Alabama 3 ahead of Texas at 4?
I think Alabama may jump to 3. I don't know. It's going to be tough for the committee, but like I said, when it comes
don't get me
down
wrong,
to
I'd rather see what you're outlining. I'd much rather see.
I think Texas
Alabama
probably
not.
would go up.
Yeah.
I think since Texas beat Alabama, Texas would probably be 3, Washington 2. So you'd probably have Michigan versus Alabama, and then Washington versus Texas. I think you probably see Texas and Washington in the Rose Bowl, and Michigan and Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. Maybe is maybe where I guess those would be. So I'm not sure. I don't know if Michigan would want to go to the Rose Bowl instead of going to. I mean, it's far away either way.
Yeah.
It's not like either one's close to Michigan. So,
well, I mean, if you take it south, it's going to be more overrun with Alabama fans, I think.
It is. Yeah. If you go out west, at least Michigan's played, being a Big Ten team, they're used to playing in the Rose Bowl and stuff of that nature over the years. So you probably have that to your advantage, and the weather shouldn't be a problem because I was just thinking, hey, if you go to the Sugar Bowl, you're guaranteed to play indoors and not have to worry about weather and stuff like that. But you shouldn't have to worry about weather at the Rose Bowl anyway. So it's going to be quite interesting over the next 24 hours here, Chris, to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm traveling a long distance either way, I make my opponent do the same rather than So,
all right.
Any parting thoughts? Some people have asked why we didn't do a live stream later. Well, first, we're an SEC channel, and we want to react in time when SEC people are probably more likely to listen. Second, we're family guys too with church in the morning and stuff like that. I'm not saying if something crazy happens, we wouldn't do a second one, but that's it.
Yep. So I just think overall, you have the SEC here that is positioned themselves in a strong way and continues to do so next year when Texas and Oklahoma move in and just even more big name brands, and is going to force us to change our channel name and all that good stuff. So SEC is in fine shape going forward, and I think Alabama definitely earned themselves a spot, and Georgia's got to go back to the drawing board. But you got to say, if you're Georgia, not a bad little run of 29 straight games, an SEC record, and two national championships in a row. So, and now Georgia will try to go back to being the pursuer once again instead of the top dog. So,
what is it? They've won 45 out of the last 47 games. Is that the stat?
Yeah. So
that's remarkable.
But Alabama's the 2 losses, so you still got to get over that hurdle.
Who was the last non-Alabama loss that Georgia had?
Last non-Alabama loss that Georgia had would have been in 2020 to Florida.
Wow.
Yeah. In 2020 to Dan Mullen. Yep. In the COVID year.
I was thinking South Carolina. Our friend SC Scout guy mentioned South Carolina in 2019. That
was their last home loss. That was their last home loss. But yeah, so their last loss to a team other than Alabama was Dan Mullen in 2020.
God, I just wish we had a 12 team this year. That would be so much fun.
Yeah,
I mean,
it would be a lot of
literally
fun.
got a couple of teams that are not going to make the playoff that could win that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't think has there ever been a time in our lifetime that you could have said that?
No, it was it's tough. I mean, I don't know the way that college football is now, though, and the way that you go back and look at it. There were some years where even during the BCS where there was a lot of debate and all that kind of stuff on some teams. So I would be interested to see. It's going to be nice to see it played out on the field. It's going to be nice to the games go into more of a pro style game anyways, with unrestricted free agency every year with the transfer portal, because that's what it is. And then contracts with NIL, because that's what those are. And, so might as well have a playoff the way the NFL does as well. So.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I hate the system the way it is, but it has produced some remarkable parity and competition.
Yep.
Blayne, parting thoughts.
No, that's it, man. We've touched it all. I'm good.
We cover, if you're new to us, we cover also baseball and basketball. We cover the SEC in depth. So hit that subscribe button, the like button if you like what you see here, and check out other content as well. I'm sure we'll be doing basketball stuff early next week. Of course, we'll wrap up the playoff decisions, the bowl decisions, all that good stuff that's coming to us Sunday. Anyway, thank you for watching. We are Southeastern 14, presented by Bet Online.